I'd spent so much time in people's homes that I knew this was a really powerful place to start because people can be quite timid in their home, but they can also very often kind of absorb stories from their homes about who they are and their value and their self-worth. And so the home can be either this like liberating space of creative expression, or it can become almost like a prison of shame.
Tam is the creator of Reclaim Your Space, a shame-free, judgment-free community that supports clearing clutter to open up more flow in your home and in your life. As a former interior designer previously running a highly successful home renovation company, Tam realized that the global shift we all experienced and continue to experience post-pandemic was a necessary shift in the way we live and our connection to self and home. Tam believes that home takes many forms: our physical environment, our body, our creativity, our relationships, and I could not agree more. Tam's definition of the mind-body-home connection was so beautifully stated. I cannot wait for you to hear it. Tam offers community support through classes, retreats, and experiences. Her writing and speaking inspire people to release shame and discover permission to express themselves authentically and honestly. Her soft and gentle approach can be experienced in just the way she speaks. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation today with my guest, Tam Orlando. So happy to have you on. We connected a few weeks ago, and I've been really looking forward to our conversation. So welcome to the Living Element, the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
So I would like to hear a little bit more about your journey to the work that you're doing now with Reclaim Your Space. I know that you are a professionally trained interior designer. I know that you owned your own home remodeling company for quite some time, a very successful company. And like many of us, COVID sort of pushed us into new paths and ways in which we live and how we serve others. And I think it's really interesting paradox too, when you think about it, because there was like this outside force that made us all both literally and symbolically go inward. And when you look at it from like the polarity of yin and yang energy, one can't really exist without the other. And so we learned that expansion for ourselves and globally really couldn't happen unless its opposite was present, which was restriction. And we were all very restricted in many ways for 2.5 years. So I think it's a really beautiful reminder from nature, because a pandemic is nature's way of sort of reminding us that it's in charge of balancing the system. And we don't always understand what its purpose is in the moment. So, we have to just kind of lean into trust that we're being forced to kind of evolve with it. So I think it's affected a lot of us in many different ways. I think that goes without saying. But I'm curious, what shifted for you? Why were you called into clutter healing and this particular aspect of home?
Yeah. Well, I agree. The pandemic, to me, it felt like the whole world's upside down. You have to think about things differently. Like you can't just keep going the way that you've been going. For me specifically, I think it was interesting because I had received, I guess, a word of the year for 2020, like November of the year before. And my word of the year was freedom. And within a few months, I was like, what kind of cosmic joke is it? Like in the year that I choose freedom as my word of the year, I'm on lockdown. And I live in New York. We worked in New Jersey. Those areas were like completely locked down pretty quickly. And it was just a really interesting moment for me because I had been contemplating something new for a while and I just couldn't see a pathway out of what I was doing. I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do anymore. There's literally no way out. I was running a team of 5 people, a home remodeling business. I was in a marriage that was becoming untenable. And I have 3 kids, and I just couldn't see any way that like it would be okay if I just said I want to do something different. And then the world shut down and I couldn't do anything about it. And I had to let all my team go. I had to shut down the business. I had to really think about like, what am I going to do next? And in that quiet space, I even remember taking a yin yoga class on Zoom, like during that time. I love yin yoga. I've trained in it as well. And in that quiet space, all of these things, all these ideas came rushing in that were like all the things that I had always loved to do, all the things that I always loved to think about and learn about and explore. And so I was sitting there in this quiet space day in and day out, like, what comes next? And how does this all fit together? And how can it be really simple, but also give space and honor all the parts of me? So Reclaim Your Space was sort of born from that. And what I realized is that what I wanted to spread as like permission granted to more authentically self-express. And I'd spent so much time in people's homes that I knew this was a really powerful place to start because people can be quite timid in their home, but they can also very often kind of absorb stories from their homes about who they are and their value and their self-worth. And so the home can be either this like liberating space of creative expression, or it can become almost like a prison of like shame and like less than ism and so I didn't expect it to be clutter clearing. I'd started by doing like virtual sessions with folks where they would say, bring me a problem area in your home and I'll give you ideas and solutions because I can see things that I realized weren't as obvious to other folks sometimes. Right. So I started with that. And then one day I got a phone call from my sister and she was like, yeah, I don't know if this is anything you could help me with, but because you work with people in their home, I thought it might be related. I have this room full of boxes and I don't want to go in there. I don't want to look at it. Every time I open the door, I see something that reminds me of something awful from my past. I don't want to see it. And this was like the second bedroom in this house that she shared with her then husband. It was all of her stuff from before they were married. And so she was like, it's been sitting there for 6 months and I don't know what to do with it. And I just started studying trauma and how trauma holds in the body and using somatic tools to move out of freeze. And I was like, oh, wow, she's having these trauma responses in her body when she's looking at the stuff in her house. It was like this big light bulb moment that the objects in our home can elicit this type of response just as much as a traumatic event happening for us or someone's words or, anything else. It could be like literally a scrap of paper on the floor with some words on it that caught her eye and she, in a freeze response, right? So on a hunch, I was like, okay, let's get on Zoom tomorrow and see what I can do. I had some ideas. And so I kind of guided her through this process that I had amalgamated it. It was an amalgamation of, different things that I had read and heard and learned and practiced myself. And in like 3 hours on Zoom, she got through 90% of the boxes in that room. And she was also empowered to do the rest herself because she had this process and she knew what to do. And so that was really, really incredible. And the next week I did a 5-day challenge on Facebook called like Clear Clutter to Open Up to Flow. And people just showed up from all around the world and it was really awesome. And so it kind of grew from there. But what I loved the most about it is that what people report back to me after working with me is you've given me so much permission and freedom to express myself in every aspect of my life. It's not just about this stuff. And it's not just about like, how do I keep my home perfectly and make it look cool like it would be in a magazine? It's like none of that. It's just like, how do I shift my relationship with the stuff in my home? How do I take back power and sovereignty in my home and in my life.
I love what you said about the home can be this playful place of creative expression, or it can feel like imprisonment. And that's so true for so many people. And, as a designer going into consultations and stuff, I can see that. I can see when clients want to invite more creativity into their space through the way they keep their home. But then I also see clients who, you had touched on it, carry a lot of shame with the way their home looks. They might open the conversation immediately opening the door like, oh, don't mind the way my home looks, or don't, we're not going to go in there, I'm just going to keep that door shut. And it's kind of like, that's probably where we should go. We probably want to go in that room and see what's lurking in there, because it sounds to me that's what's keeping you kind of maybe stuck a little bit. So that's a wonderful way to kind of frame it. And I will be honest, I too have had that shameful experience with my home. Being an interior designer and not having a home that looks like it's out of a magazine was a really interesting kind of uncovering for myself. I would be going into these homes where clients had really massive budgets and doing projects, and then really feeling almost embarrassed, like when I would try to invite people over, and because I feel like there's this expectation that my home should look a certain way because of my job. And I really had to learn that, I am not my client. My home is perfect for me, right? And so, I touched on it before. I'm not the expert. I'm still learning to kind of uncover these things for myself too.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I talk about in my 8-week course is that one of the things that really can hold us back from making progress is this sense of comparison. And often we're comparing ourselves to something that probably isn't even real, or isn't realistic, or isn't even aligned with what we would want. I've had that as well. I go into a client's home and I'm like, oh, I love all of this and it's so perfect. And then I realize, well, I have 3 kids and it might not be practical for me to have this $10,000 sofa carpet over it, right? There's just things oh, it looks so beautiful, all that cream and furniture. And I'm like, well, yes. And I don't want to live a life where I feel stressed out all the time that my kids are going to ruin something just by being kids, right? So for me, it's yeah, very interesting to see how these comparisons can be, really kind of debilitating sometimes and paralyzing, I think. And I want to touch on something that you brought up, which is this idea of connection, right? Like you said, you are embarrassed sometimes to invite people into your home. And I see that come up a lot. And so one of the things that I love to just highlight is that becoming more empowered in your home environment, clearing clutter in ways that feel good to you, it actually can offer space for connection on small and large scale. I've had some folks who are like, oh, I cleared the kitchen table and now I sit down with my kid and we have a conversation there every day. Something as small and as important as that, to I've invited friends into my house. And even though the clutter is not fully gone and it doesn't look picture perfect, I've changed the way that I see it and what I've let it mean about myself. And we all had a great time and no one said anything about the mess and everyone just enjoyed being together. This person had been cutting themselves off from that connection because of a perception of what people might think or feel and coming into the space, or a perception of themselves, right? That was perhaps not so kind and loving. So yeah, I think it's really interesting how this ties into everything else. It's relationships and connection and accessing choice in every aspect of your life. And the other piece with the picture perfect magazine photos that I think is kind of hilarious is, and I don't know if you've had this experience. I'm curious if you have. I've had clients where we've gone in and we've done hundreds of thousands of dollars of remodeling work in their home. And then we say, okay, we're going to come take photos. And then we get in there and we're just like, oh no. And it takes us hours to clean up or hide all the things that are just out and about so that we can take those portfolio images, photos. And then we have to put it all back exactly how it was. And the purpose of saying that is like, it's just not what's real. Like what you see in the magazines is not what's real. No one's living in that living room that has like the one flower in the vase and like nothing else showing anywhere. Like it's just not. Um, so folks can afford to have a space that they don't use, but like our homes are meant to be, I believe, to a living, breathing organism that works with us and supports us in what we're creating and is this kind of beautiful symbiosis, right? Between like my creation, my creative life, my work, my family, the relationships that I'm building, and the environment that supports those things. And that will become messy. And then we'll put it back and reset. It's like this breathing thing. I grew up in an environment that was much more neat and tidy and perfect than what I created for my family. And there's definitely gifts from that I've taken, but it also I found was actually quite limiting to my ability to play and create like as broadly as I wanted to. And now sometimes when I'll go to clean up a mess that one of my kids has just like become too overwhelmed to clean up on their own, particularly in our art room, but sometimes anyway. As I'm like picking things up, I'm like, oh, this isn't just a mess. This is creation. Like there's such amazing art and objects and things that they put together that like I would never have thought to do. And it was kind of bred from the chaos in some way. And so there is this gift of understanding that people create in different ways, people process information in different ways, people experience their environment in different ways. There's not one right or wrong way that an environment could be nourishing for someone. And so, yeah, how do we really tune into like, what is a nourishing environment for me? And then how do I create that?
As you're talking, I'm just thinking about my own daughter who I've talked about this before with other people. And it's interesting to hear you say that because I am kind of the neat, everything is kind of put away. Like just today, like things were feeling really chaotic. And it was really just, a few blankets were tossed, a couple throw pillows were on the floor, you know, electronic devices were scattered about, shoes weren't in the bin, right? And so that's my morning routine is for me to function at my desk for the day. I need to know that the rest of the house is in order. And I think that really stems from my childhood where not necessarily the home was cluttered, but at times just chaos and loudness. And like, I know that that was my way of organizing chaos in my life was organizing and keeping my room a certain way, right? But my daughter, she's the complete opposite. She is super creative. She already tells people that she is an artist. She's 8. She has a career in art. She really does believe this. And of course, we encourage that. But her bedroom is wild, and there's a lot of times it's really challenging for me just walking past her room. I can feel it kind of like coming up in my body. Like, how am I going to handle this? And sometimes she does let it get out of control to the point where I'm not sure how to handle it because I want to help her, but I want to teach her to keep her room organized and cleaned up. But at the same time, because I loved what you said, okay, there's this quote unquote, air quote mess, but really this is just creativity. And I love that you said that because to me, I would always look at it as it's a mess. And is this a representation of what's going on in her mind? Like, is it something I need to help her with? Is it something normal for her? So I love that you brought that perspective to it because you're right. Everybody creates and lives and breathes differently. So how beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just like right there with you because my 8-year-old is my daughter is also 8 and she's also an artist. And she's actually right now taking a class that's going to culminate in like a market where she gets to sell her and her work. And yeah, it's been very confronting because even though I'm similar, those parts were very uncomfortable, I think, for my parents growing up as well, right? So it's been like a huge journey for me to like realize, okay, there's not one right way to do it. And like, if I'm uncomfortable with the mess, how much of that is about the mess and how much of that is about something going on in my nervous system that like I'm making some meaning of the mess. Often I'll say for me, it would be this story that, and it still happens. It's not all fully behind me, but I'm more aware of it now. It would be this story of like, oh my gosh, this is so much work for me. It's growing. The work that I'm going to have to do to resolve this at some point just keeps growing. And I am already overwhelmed and it's not how I want to spend my time. I don't want to spend my time cleaning other people's messes. So I'm realizing a lot of that came from, patriarchal conditioning of like, as the mom or as the woman in the household, I somehow would be responsible for all of the labor that goes into the cleaning up. And so I've been working with my kids in different ways, very intentionally. Like you said, this is your mess. And if it's active mess, whereas like you're in it and you're working, you're playing, and it's a game that you have going on, great. But if that area is complete, before you move on to someplace else, you do need to clean it up. And I've gotten pushback. There's always pushback, but really is starting to shift. And like I said, she's my youngest. So I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old as well. And there'll be times where I'll say, okay, for 15 minutes, just go up to your room. We'll set a timer. We'll put on some music and just get done as much as you can get done in that time. And they can do it. Like they can do it now, right? My daughter the other day actually literally said to me, Mom, I didn't even know I was capable. But it started with a lot of times like sitting next to her and doing it with her, but making sure she's involved in the process and talking it through. Like, here's where I'm putting this. It looks like you have a lot of this type of thing. So why don't we make a box or a basket or a bin for like gems and a bin for small toys and a bin for stuffed animals that are this size and a bin for, right? Like, so I'm like trying to sort of show her ways that she can then be empowered to use the method and keep going forward. And it's interesting. I'll use this as a segue into like what I'm doing now. The bulk of the work I do now with clutter clearing is supporting folks on group clutter clearing calls on Zoom. And so folks will call in from wherever they are around the world. And for a period of time, most sessions are 90 minutes, but once a month I do a 3-hour session. We'll each be working on our own clutter or putting away the dishes or folding the laundry or like resetting our space or diving deep into something that's very tender maybe and more emotional. And just by the mere fact of us being there together is so supportive for many, many people. And it's interesting. I'm noticing a trend that a lot of the folks who come to me are perhaps somewhere like on a spectrum of ADHD or some other executive functioning kind of spectrum. And one of the things that I've heard now a few times is that there's just this really supportive thing about like, you're doing your work and I'm doing mine, and just your presence and the sound of the papers ruffling or the sound of the dishes like keeps me on track with what I'm doing. And so I'm using that more and more with my kids as well. Like, okay, you need to do your homework and you're having trouble concentrating. I'm going to sit here and write my emails to my list and you can sit next to me and work on your homework, right? But the clutter clearing calls have been really successful in those ways because it's like, I'm not alone in this. And when I start to feel like I'm a little, oh, this is boring or I'm a little distracted, but there's all these other folks here doing it with me, it brings me back to what I'm doing. And it's also cool because kind of like what I shared about like setting a timer for my kids, we do the same thing. So we set a timer. We're like, okay, for 35 minutes, we're going to do some clearing, work on your project, and then we're going to check in and we're going to pause and we're going to say like, do I need a drink? Do I need a snack? Did some emotional thing come up that like I want to deal with or process through verbally so that I can keep going? Because clutter and objects and all of that, like it really does hold emotion and energy and stories, right? And those come up. And if we're not ready for it, it can send us into that freeze state where we're like, I don't want to go near it again. So yeah, it's been really cool. It was a bit like of a hunch and experiment. Like, I wonder how this would work. But yeah, the folks who've been hearing it really love it. And so I'm excited for that to keep gently going.
Yeah, there's so much in that I want to go back to. I hope I remember to touch on everything, but I love what you're doing in that sort of community type of environment, because I think that that is so important in a lot of our journeys. I mean, a lot of people, I think collectively are healing. I think that that's just the state of the world right now, especially coming out of this pandemic. There's a lot to heal from. A lot has shifted for people. And when you're on that healing journey, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical, whatever, that need for community is so imperative, because there's a lot of times, especially I would even say, the spiritual journey in particular, it can feel very lonely. And that really even ties in with how you were kind of saying, that patriarchal, like the mom, the wife, she does everything. She's caretaker of the home and of all the things. And I feel that a lot too. I'm sort of that person in my family who I consider is breaking those generational cycles of trauma. And now I'm seeing it in other roles in my life. Like, no, the four of us live in this house. We're all going to take care of it. So, when they get home from school, they get a little freedom. And then when it's time to cook dinner, like at least a few nights a week, we are all cooking dinner together, and mealtime can be stressful just with picky eaters in general. But I do find when you engage them in the actual cooking, they tend to be a little bit more engaged in the eating. So yeah, it's interesting when you start breaking old patterns, they start showing up in other ways for you. So I love that you touched on that, because that's so true. And how beautiful, again, to just be present with your child and teaching them. And just like anything with children, it is repetitive, right? Just constant reminders. And as frustrating as that can be, it's what they need, right? And sometimes we as parents just have to pause and remind ourselves of that. And just having someone's presence with you really can make all the difference. So what a cool way you're working with people to tend to their clutter or just routines throughout the day. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I really enjoy it. And I'm getting a lot done in my house too.
Yeah, that's the
So
perk,
fun
right?
because it's like, oh, this is kind of great. Um, yeah, it's a perk. And it's also really fascinating because as I'm working in my own home, I'm learning it from the inside as well. Right. So once I was in a group session and I was folding laundry, and because I tell people, like, pay attention to what voices are coming up in your head as you're doing this work. Pay attention to like when your body asks for something. Pay attention to when you want to stop or when you start thinking about something else, right? So I'm like folding my kid laundry and like all this shame is coming up and I'm just noticing it. Oh, wow. Like something as simple as folding laundry was bringing up all of this other stuff that was like so tangential, but like deep, like really deep stuff about how I was doing as a mom and like what I should be doing more of and what I should care about more and what I, just all of this. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so then I can speak to it from the perspective of someone who's actually doing it with me, right? Just this idea that like, I can't imagine trying to teach something that I haven't experienced and practiced for myself.
100%. I say that all the time that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to say it, but you hear things like the teacher becomes the student. And sometimes when I'm talking to clients or talking to this audience, there's this image of me that people might have that I'm the expert, especially if I'm talking very specifically about conscious design or feng shui or whatever it might be. But really, my whole purpose, and I didn't realize it at first, but my whole reason for even starting this podcast and getting involved with the home space energetically is because I needed to learn. Like, I want to learn more too. Like, I want to talk to more people like you, and I want to hear different perspectives. So my message to people out there and my clients is I'm learning and growing and healing like right along with you. And I think that people find a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I've come to be very choosy about folks I will trust as my teachers. And often there's like a moment of like a splitting away. And it often will be when like a teacher's like becomes dogmatic in what they're teaching and also their actions are not lining up. I say that because I was very hesitant to even get into the role of teacher or guide or coach or whatever it is that, that I'm doing. And I realized that was part of the reason. And for me to come into this with the authenticity that I desire to always kind of present, being in like my integrity, it's been really helpful to just keep doing this work myself and digging into like what comes up inside of me and what are my preconceptions and where do I have something totally new to learn, and then listening, like hearing other people's experiences and watching like, oh, that doesn't match up to my experience, but that's really interesting. And like building this library of possibilities. There was something you said that I wanted to also touch on, the patriarchal patterns and the intergenerational trauma and all of that, right? I think there's something like wired in to my literally like our DNA, right? For those of us socialized as women, where if I walk into a room, I see everything that's happening there and I see everything that needs to be done and I see everything that's a myth, right? And I have had to work to kind of like soften my gaze a little bit and be like, listen, right now, Tam, it's time to be present with your kids and enjoy this story that you're reading together or enjoy this board game. And like all of that will be taken care of at a different time. And when I created the schedule for my clutter clearing sessions, I was like, oh, I realized that like another benefit was that I don't have to think about the laundry because I know at this time on Wednesday, I'm going to be getting on this call and I'm going to get laundry done. And I don't have to think about that mess over there at my desk because I've set aside time for it somewhere else. And it allows me to be present to what I'm doing and day in and day out, like more and more. Because I was finding, and I hear this from a lot of people socialized as women, that this housework can just like absorb so much of our energy. Just the fact, not even the act of doing it, just the knowing it's there waiting to be done at some point in time can make it really hard to focus on whatever else it is that we're creating, whether it's a business or our job or podcast or art or parenting, like whatever it is that we want to be present to. It becomes so much harder because there's this like constant running to-do list in the back of our head. And so a lot of folks have said like having this rhythm to my week, this time I'm going to show up and I'm going to take care of this task or these series of tasks, has been really liberating in that way as well. And so I really love that. And I find for myself, same thing. Like it's just been really much easier to focus on what else I want to focus on. And it's the whole reason that I do what I do, right? I feel like Reclaim Your Space is a little subversive because people come to me and they're like, so tell me, like, how many times a week should I mop the floor? And I'm like, that's not what I teach. It's just really, really fun.
I wanted to pause this episode to quickly mention our e-commerce site, Shop Elemental. The intention behind Shop Elemental is to ensure a more conscious buying experience and provide you with the tools and a practical approach to applying beautiful objects in your home or space. The connection between the outside world and our interior spaces has a profound effect on our lives and contributes greatly to our overall well-being. This strive towards balance and connection is the essence of the 5-element theory. Currently in the shop, you will find crystal sun catchers, mala beads, journals, incense burners, and more. And soon we'll be launching our signature elemental collection. We'll be continually adding curated art and decorative objects that support mind, body, and home, that intentionally apply characteristics of the 5 elements, providing your living space with balance and beauty. We are a small team with a small offering, but already growing. And to show our gratitude for your support of the podcast, we are offering you 15% off your first purchase. Just use coupon code PODCAST at checkout. Thank you again for your support. Now back to today's conversation. Well, I want to segue just a little bit. Well, sort of. It's not even really too much of a segue, but I'm really passionate about bringing more awareness to the mind body home connection. And I think what I know from you so far, you kind of share that same sentiment. And I really teach air quotes, I guess, but that the home is really just as essential to your well-being as is the mind and the body. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And I don't know if maybe you have your own way of sort of defining that.
Yeah. So I think about our home as an extension of our body. And like I had touched on this earlier, this idea that it can be like a living, breathing organism, that it should be able to kind of breathe with us. It should be able to like actively have mess and then get cleaned up. It should be able to grow and evolve and change as we grow and evolve and change. So that like I also teach like everything is temporary. It's to relieve the pressure of like a decision, but also it's to say like, if this thing that you brought into your home brings you joy today, great. And if like a month from now you find that it's no longer bringing you joy, like it's okay to let it go. In fact, it's probably very important to keep letting things go that don't bring you joy or nourishment or don't function in a way that supports your well-being. So I see the home as like a support to our well-being. I also see it as a place where we can express ourselves and kind of express our continuing evolution as humans. And then it feeds us back, right? So I touched on the stories, like the objects in our home can speak to us and reflect stories of shame and all the things that we haven't got done and all the things that we wanted to learn and didn't have time or whatever it is, right? Or our home can speak back to us stories of our vision and where we're headed and what we value and what excites us and inspires us and what really allows us to continue to expand and like learn and grow and create. So, yeah, I think that this connection is like really vital to understand. And the other piece of it where I kind of nerd out on this a little bit is the nervous system, right? Our nervous system is always tracking for signs of danger. And if it finds safety, then it can relax. If we're aware of that, we can work with it to create a home that is bringing us nourishing, comforting, soothing information to all of our sensors. But if we're not aware of it, what we might not realize is that there might be something in our home that's literally causing us constant stress on this like subtle level because our nervous system is tracking it constantly. And so it's just draining our energy, right? Think about like a computer, like I have a kind of an older laptop and the CPU, right? The usage of the central processing unit, whatever, is like often at like 80%. And so everything's going very slowly and kind of sluggish because 80% of its processing power is being used just to like maintain the stuff in the background. And I feel like our body is similar and our subconscious mind and our nervous system is like, if there's all this constant stressful information coming in that our body has to be processing in the background, then like everything feels a little more heavier and dull and like sluggish. But if our environment, it can energize us too. If it brings in colors that we love and smell and textures and images that inspire us, but really thinking about it with all of the senses involved is part of it. And then I also teach yoga and I also teach a creative process called cosmic smash booking. And so with these things all together, the idea of reclaiming your space is not just about the three-dimensional environment, but it's also about reclaiming space in the body, reclaiming access to your mobility, reclaiming access to your energetic kind of well-being. And then with cosmic smash booking, reclaiming access to your creative expression and your playfulness. And it is a very messy process. So it's like reclaiming your access to being comfortable in the imperfection, which was quite a learning curve for me, and has been really helpful. And So yeah, I kind of try to look at it in this very broad and holistic way to see how are all these different parts of ourselves getting the support that they need.
Yeah, that was such a great definition. And I want to touch on the cosmic smash booking, but before we do, I loved your definition because I work with feng shui, and sometimes there's this misconception of what is feng shui. But if I could take the word feng shui out of it and just say exactly what Tam said, like that's what we do, right? It's about connecting all of these areas of your life and uncovering what's no longer serving you in your home. That's kind of step one. And then the next step is, okay, how do you want to move forward in your creativity, your spirituality, your abundance, your relationships? These are all areas that are touched on through a feng shui consultation. And I love getting other people's perspectives on it because sometimes I'm very isolated to the terminology. But I do want to talk about your cosmic smash booking because that is something new to me. I had never heard of this until I was looking around on your website, and I just started reading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I've been really feeling called, I would say probably, I don't know, maybe the last 6 months, just really exploring my creative side more. Being a designer and a business owner, I am already creative. I never doubted that about myself. But there was like this part of myself that was a little lost. Like as a child, I was very creative into arts and crafts and doing all that. And I really kind of lost that part of myself. And it wasn't until we talked about our daughters, it wasn't until she came along and into her own creativity that I've really been wanting to explore that side of myself more. So instead of watching TV on a Friday night, I'm like sketching people's profiles across for me on the couch. Or, my daughter brought home oil pastels and I was like, I don't remember using these like as a kid. I'm going to try again. And so I'm really exploring this. So I definitely want to hear more about this cosmic smash booking that you offer.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, and I feel that too, right? Because I have a bachelor's of fine arts, and I think I'm an artist at heart. Like that's who I am. But I have so rarely been able to prioritize that for myself for some reason, right? I think that Cosmic Smash Booking kind of came to help me pave a way through the pandemic. And it was a big part of my process for kind of figuring out how do all these parts fit together and what wants to be expressed in the next thing that I do and where do I go next and etc. It's a process of intentional creativity that is created by a dear friend of mine. Her name is Kat Z. And she created this as part of her recovery journey from alcohol and substance abuse originally. And it just has spread all around the world as this beautiful process of, I like to call it reclaiming your creative expression, but it's more than that. It's a way of connecting in with yourself. It is a bit of a spiritual practice for me. It is really sometimes confronting. I'll also say it's meant to be very accessible to folks who are not necessarily trained in art in any way. It's also meant to be very accessible for people in every socioeconomic kind of situation. So we start with a composition notebook. I use ones that cost 50 cents at Target. And by the time we've set it up, it just becomes this whole thing with a life of its own. And the first step that can be very confronting for folks is that we crumple the pages before we make art on them. And I'll say it was confronting for me because the first time I made a Cosmic Smash book, I didn't crumple my page. Like, you want me to do what? But now it's like the best feeling ever. It's so liberating. And what's amazing is that you start putting paint on it and it already has a texture, a light, forms are coming through, very process oriented work. So there's no, like, at least in the way that I teach it, there's no desired result. We set an intention, we do some free writing and journaling on the page, and then we layer on top of that with all kinds of mixed media. And we just are kind of following our inspiration, following our muse along the way and tuning in. And then at the end, what's really cool is that we do a reading of the page, and the page has something to tell us. Like, I don't know if you use tarot or oracle cards or anything like that, but sometimes I think about it as like we're making our own deck of cards. We're kind of accessing wisdom that we already have somewhere inside of us. But it can come through from our subconscious because we're working in the right brain and we're working with color and materials and we're just being really playful. And in that flow state, information comes through that sometimes is really, really profound. Sometimes it's very simple, but it's like a really helpful reminder. Like I taught my first in-person session of cosmic smash booking just this week at my local library. At the end, I asked the participants for feedback, and each of them said, it was so much fun. And like, that sounds so simple, but most of them were like retired teachers and older women. Like, how often do they just do something that's just for fun? So even just that is so subversive and beautiful. And I love practicing it. I love teaching it. And I love when other people kind of try it out and have these really cool experiences. And it has been a really big part of me getting more comfortable with my kids' way of being creative and messy. And I teach it to my kids too.
I'm curious about the crumpling of the paper. What's the intention behind doing that?
Yeah. So a couple things. I don't know if I could speak to the initial intention, but what I've learned from it, one piece is like unlocking the energy of the paper, getting in touch with where did this come from? Where the paper itself holds the energy of like everyone who's been a part of creating it, right? There's the sensory aspect for me that's really beautiful. It creates a sound. I'm like physically now in touch with what I'm working on in this new way. And then the biggest piece, I think, is you're starting with an imperfect surface. And so it like removes the pressure of creating like a perfect piece of artwork.
Oh, wow.
Not what it's about. It's like, it's not about the end result. It's about the process. It's about how does it feel to put the color on the page. It's about like the messages that are coming up as you're laying this page out and creating it. And can you just make art for the joy of making art without being attached to the end result being something in particular that was a particular way?
Oh, wow. Okay. That like sold me on it. Because that's a huge part of what I'm working through now is my perfectionism. Like I've just recently with my therapist have uncovered kind of my origin of my perfectionism. So I'm like right on the cusp of like healing, right? The awareness is there. I know why I am the way I am now. And I'm sure there's more to uncover about that. But I love that you said that because even sometimes sitting down with my kids and trying to do like an art project, there's been nights where like everybody's getting a canvas and we're painting and it's like, here's me over here trying to be perfect. That is something that I struggle with. I struggle with just being present and having fun. And I love that this is also a very intuitive process. And I had Kim Chesney on the podcast, the author of Radical Tuition, and I've been studying under her for many years. So this is like way cool.
Yeah. Love to have we can try it out.
So cosmic smash booking and then clutter healing, do the two sort of interplay with each other at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, on this kind of like hunch that I had, I thought these might really support each other. So what I've done a couple times now is I run my Reclaim Your Space masterclass alongside an introductory course to cosmic smash booking. And I invite people to join for both. And it has really supported transmuting of energy. And so there's this interplay between like, if something's coming up in the space that feels like emotionally confronting, it can be worked with on the page in the Cosmic Smash book. And the Cosmic Smash booking has like opened up permission for folks to think about their space a little bit differently and more free. Like, oh, there's not one right way to do it. Like, I could think about all the stuff that I have in a pile right now. Well, what do I want to display where? Like I could start to think about my space as like a 3-dimensional canvas of what is letting my intuition lead me in the setup of my space as well. So there's been like this very cool interplay between the two that I didn't know if it would really work until I tried it. And then I did. And I was like, this is so great. Um, so that's been really fun. And it's funny because sometimes I'll have people who like really identify as artists and creatives, but when it comes to like working on a canvas or on paper or whatever, and then when it comes to their space, like it doesn't quite translate for them. But when I've been able to put it in these terms of like, think about it like cosmic smash cooking for your room or for your bedroom or for your living room. Like, I'm allowed to do that. But there's something, I don't know if you've found this, I'm curious with your design clients, but there's something that feels very permanent about like decisions we make in our home, in our space that can again be kind of paralyzing. Like, oh, I have to make the right choice. Maybe because it's a bigger investment, or maybe because it's just like has 3-dimensional form. Like, I don't know what it is that makes it feel that way, but I'm really trying to continue to kind of question that. Like, do you have to make the exact right choice? Like, when I moved into my house here, I was buying quite a bit of the furnishings for the house and the soft goods and things from Facebook Marketplace. And I would bring some stuff in and I'd be like, oh, nope, don't like it. And so then it would be like, I'm going to just sell it back again to someone else, let it go or donate it. But letting myself have that freedom really allowed me then more space to find what I did love and what I did want to have my home kind of look and feel like. So there's this theme that just runs throughout all of what I do, which is about this permission and reclaiming that sovereignty to make those choices. Yeah, your own intuition.
Yeah, I would say
So,
that I definitely run into that where clients feel very pressured to making the right choice. And I think that's part of the reason why they hire a designer in the first place is because they're overwhelmed by their options or they can't really visualize for themselves what a finished space could look like. But that's really where intuition, um, I've been really integrating that into my practice with my clients. And so there's ways in which your intuition talks to you or speaks to you, and it can look different for everyone, but just kind of giving them some of those guiding principles about how's it coming up for you? Where do you feel it in your body? Is it coming in fast? Is it coming in with some level of confidence? Like these are the things you can look out for. So yeah, I'm building upon it now, but it's trying to guide clients more to using that intuitive part of themselves, even in just design selections, because I never want to say this is the way your home should look. I have no place saying that. Just like in intuition work or in feng shui, my role is simply to guide them to their own conclusions. I'm really trying to work with clients in the design world too and help them make those decisions for themselves. I can certainly limit their options. I think that that's important because my goodness. So yeah, it does come up. And I think having a big investment in something is a big part of that because, there's a lot of money stories out there. And when you're making bigger investments, it can be paralyzing to what if I make the wrong decision, right? So, well, Tam, I'm loving this conversation. I think I could keep you here all afternoon, but I do want to just give the opportunity if people want to do one of these clutter healing sessions or cosmic smash booking sessions with you, how can people find you?
yeah. So my website is really a great place to find all the information. I have a monthly calendar there, Reclaim Your Space community sessions. So that includes the group clutter clearing, it includes cosmic smash booking, and it includes short yoga sessions, gentle yoga, a few times a week that are available to, you can just sort of try one out and come to one-off session, or I even have memberships. So you can say, okay, I'm going to have a clutter clearing membership, and then you can come to as many as you want each month. And like I said, creating that rhythm and consistency seems to be really supportive for folks. And I know it's been supportive for me. So I'm happy to offer that. And then a couple times a year, I'll also lead a group class that's sort of foundations in this kind of shift in how we think about our space. So I call it the Reclaim Your Space Masterclass. And like I said, I'll usually run it alongside like an introduction to cosmic smash booking class as well. And all of these are on Zoom. So you can join from anywhere in the world. I have clients from every continent except Antarctica, which makes
Oh, wow.
and I am looking always to just create this really safe, shame-free, judgment-free sense of community where people can bring their whole self to the work that they want to do. And we can just kind of celebrate each other's progress. And everyone comes with a different kind of starting point. Everyone comes with a different goal and intention. And there's no one right way to do it. And I'm continually kind of looking at how do I evolve what I offer to really meet the needs of the folks that want to work with me. I'm also on Instagram at visions_of_Tam and on Facebook. But these days, my website and my email list are the best way to stay in touch.
Perfect. Thank you, Tam. I will put all of that in the show notes for everyone to get to you. And thank you so much. It sounds like you are meeting people where they are. And I think that that's what people really need right now. I don't think the world needs any more gurus and experts. I think we really just need people to hold our hand and walk us through this world together. And you are definitely one of those people. So thank you, Tam, for all that you're doing and being on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I told you you would love this conversation. For me, it's just so wonderful to know that there are others out there that think like me and want to lead conversations that open people up to embracing their authenticity and releasing judgment around their home and environment. And I believe one of the best ways in which we can allow that release is through support and community. So if anything from this conversation resonated with you, or you do need that communal support, please take a look at Tam's upcoming offerings. This week, May 15th, she is running a free workshop series, Create Spaces That Work For You, a workshop for highly sensitive people who are feeling overwhelmed by mess. And starting May 22nd, Tam's signature 6-week group masterclass, Reclaim Your Space, will be kicking off. Everything is linked in the show notes for you, as well as a few complimentary gifts from Tam. These include a free downloadable 10 tips to simplify your home tending practice. And Tam also opened up a few slots on her calendar for anyone needing a little extra support, so be sure to take advantage of all of those. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast. Your feedback means so much. I've been receiving such wonderful notes and messages from all over the world. And that is such a validation that I'm meant to be here in this space, sharing my voice with you. If you haven't already, please rate and review or share this episode with someone in your community. That is how we collectively grow and support one another, in turn bettering how we thrive at home. Until next time, much love and gratitude.